excited to discuss some of the key takeaways from our recent ebook entitled Moving to Always On from an Event-Driven Strategy. This ebook is the first volume in our Sophisticated Finance Marketer series, which is really dedicated to educating today's modern finance marketer with best practices and strategies for content marketing. And one of the great things about this ebook series is it's full of cutting-edge insights from some of today's leading minds in content marketing strategy, especially for financial services. And I'm really excited to bring together some of these experts today to share their insights with you in our webinar panel. But before we get into this webinar, I have just a few housekeeping items. This webinar will last about 1 hour, including 5 to 10 minutes at the end of the webinar for questions. I know we originally said it would be 45 minutes, but we have such a great panel today, I definitely wanted to extend that. So if you can't stay for the whole hour, we definitely will have this recorded for you, and we'll be sharing a link to the webinar slides, the ebook, and a recording of the webinar after, so you can watch it at your own leisure. Also, your phone lines are muted by default, but you can use the Q&A box on the right of your screen to ask any questions, and we'll be answering questions at the end of the webinar for about 10 minutes. So let's get right into today's webinar. Before I introduce our panel, let's take a moment to define what always on means. We all know that this is a hot buzzword in marketing circles, but today we wanted to separate the hype from what really works, especially in finance marketing. And from our ebook interviews with content marketing experts, we've gleaned that what really works is education that inspires. Always On is really about delivering valuable information during those moments when your audience is searching for specific information or planning something in their life. And when we say inspire your audience, we don't mean thinking in terms of products like checking accounts or credit cards, but instead thinking about how you can build relationships by helping people accomplish meaningful goals like gaining financial independence or investing for the future or starting a small business. Second, Always On is also consistent. It's about thinking in terms of building and retaining your audience over a long-term basis rather than short-term initiatives or campaigns. It's quality content delivered on a consistent basis. Shane Snow, one of our panelists who you'll meet in a few minutes, had a nice analogy. It's more like regular exercise than the shot in the arm. So it's really thinking about that long-term rather than short-term tactics. And then finally, it's relevant. It's about attracting customers with a pull strategy rather than chasing them. And you do this by giving first rather than expecting something in return. And effective targeting can help you deliver hyper-relevant content to specific audience. And we'll definitely talk more about that later. But the good news for finance companies is that you're in the business of helping people manage their money. So you have expertise that everyone needs. So it really sets you up for always-on success. The bad news, if there is bad news, is that there are some major challenges, and some of them are specific to the finance industry, and some are common to all marketers. But number one, it's not free. You know, developing content, sourcing content, incubating it, it's a lot of work, and it does take time, resources, and money. So some choose not to do it. Also, sometimes it takes a while for top management to get on board. And they really must buy into the content marketing strategy if it's going to be successful. And it's not really just their buy-in that you need. It's also their personal participation, because they're the face of your brand, both externally and internally. And when senior management isn't willing to engage from a personal standpoint, that really is a huge opportunity that's missed. Number three, siloed organizations. I think we all see this. Lack of communication and collaboration between departments can literally kill your social strategy. Number four, like again, another one we all know, legal and compliance issues. And with good reason. You know, a misplaced tweet can violate compliance laws and cost a lot of money in fines. So, and not to mention becoming a business school case study on what not to do. You know, we all fear that, but there's a lot of reason to be nervous. But we'll talk today about how we can get around that. And then the measurement conundrum. You know, the fact is, Always On is a holistic strategy, and measurement's really complicated. So measuring Always On success and tying it to revenue is really difficult, but it's absolutely essential if you're going to be successful. So we'll talk about that in a minute. So despite all of these challenges, the risk of not doing something interesting is bigger than not doing anything at all. This was a quote from Paul Butcher at our Finance Connect event last year. We're having our Finance Connect next month, so keep your eye out for that. But that's our annual finance event for marketers in finance. Mainly, the risk is your customers are having these conversations on social and educating themselves no matter what. And many finance companies like BlackRock and Citi, American Express are consistently producing relevant, consistent, and inspiring content that benefits the bottom line. So if you're not doing anything, that gap is really growing, as we see a lot of successful finance companies doing this well. And that's what we're here to talk about today. We wanted to give you some practical advice on how to move to always on in the finance industry. And I'd like to bring on our panel of experts to talk about these 4 key steps to moving to an always on strategy. And to frame our discussion, I wanted to structure our panel around these 4 important topics. Number 1, how do you convince stakeholders? And by stakeholders, I mean top management, but also how do you break down those silos within your organization to use all the players within your teams, including legal and compliance, and everyone that you need to work with for social? Number 2, how do you source great content to fill your editorial calendar? 3, how do you balance that editorial calendar with real-time market commentary, especially given the challenges around legal and compliance? And finally, how do you engineer success by measuring and optimizing? So let's meet our panel. So to introduce our panel, why don't we do a quick round robin and have each of our panelists introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about what you do and your experience with content marketing. We'll start with Jenny. Jenny, are you on mute? Oh, I think we lost Jenny.
How does this sound?
Oh, there you are.
Okay.
Sounds
it's
great.
early on the West Coast, so apologies.
No problem.
I have a background in content marketing for many, many years. I've worked at B of A, Schwab, iShares, BlackRock, and most recently Personal Capital, and now I've started my own consulting business, and I've done content strategy for startups as well. So I'm really excited to be here and sort of see where all of this is heading, not just for the financial world, but for basically every company working in the world that has social media.
Great. Thank you, Jenny. Shane.
Yeah, so my background is in technology journalism. I got my start as a journalist writing for magazines like Fast Company and Wired, and about 4 years ago, co-founded a company called Contently, whose mission is to help build a better media world. And so we work with freelance journalists and creative people, photographers, help them get gigs, and at the same time, we build tools and provide access to those journalists for brand publishers and content marketers. So Contently is basically helps content marketers be successful with the technology and the freelance talent that they need if they're working with freelancers. So we've been doing that for about 4 years, and as such, we've kind of with our journalism experience have built a publication around how to succeed at content marketing and kind of drinking our own champagne, as they say, at LinkedIn to help people do this while doing it ourselves.
Great. Great to have you, Shane. Lauren, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. So hi, Lauren Seslow. I'm BlackRock's social media marketing strategist. Prior to BlackRock, I actually worked in advertising with consumer product goods. And currently, I manage all of our paid social activity with the goal of building brand awareness and distributing our thought leadership content through highly targeted audiences, which include financial advisors and investors through a variety of channels. Also wanted to thank LinkedIn for being such a great partner to BlackRock and for inviting me to participate in this webinar series, and looking forward to the discussion today. So thank you so much.
No problem. Thank you, Lauren. It's our pleasure to have you. And Jill, can you give a quick intro?
Sure. I'll make it very quick. I know we're pressed for time. So I am the Senior Vice President of Social and Content Strategy for Digitas LBI. My background spans 15 years in digital marketing across many sectors: education, fashion, lifestyle, financial services. And I've specifically been focusing on social and content for about the last 6 years. And thanks for having me.
Great. Thank you. So as you can tell, we have a lot of great social media and social content minds in the room today. We were joking earlier that we could probably do hours and hours worth of webinars. So, you know, a lot of great content today. We actually have more content in the ebook that I mentioned earlier, but we wanted to narrow down the conversation to just these 4 key topics. But if you want to dive deeper, we'll definitely share the ebook with all attendees after the webinar. So let's jump into our first discussion topic. In our ebook interviews, we saw that when it comes to convincing top management, one of the most important things you can do is demonstrate how Always On contributes to key business objectives and showing evidence that it works. You know, connecting it to web traffic, then to brand engagement, and finally to sales, which is what really matters. So, Jenny, why don't we start with you, and panelists, feel free to chime in. How do you go about convincing senior management that they need to get really serious about social and Always On?
Yeah, I think this is a challenge for many of us, but every year or every week that passes, it feels a little bit easier because there's sort of the high stakes of not doing it. One of the first things we did, this was at iShares, was to put it into language that they were already speaking, which is to say ROI, and really figuring out our own way of sharing what was happening, what engagement actually meant, and concluding that we were making, you know, by a magnitude of the investment back. So that was really important. And I think part of it is you're asking for budget. That's simple. But the other part is that you're asking them for engagement. And I actually think that takes a little bit longer. So most social programs, in my experience, have been built off the sides of the desks of a great group of collaborators, whether they're from legal or SMEs or client experience people, whatever they're called. PR is a great partner as well. And so most of us, or most of them, I'll say, are doing this in addition to their real job. And so what has happened is the value's been there, and suddenly their KPIs and their jobs, they're rated by how much they're contributing to this, or it's 10% or 20%. So I think it's a process, and I think that it's really what you're talking about is a way of organizing a company. It's not just adding social media. It's realizing that many of us are going to be a part of this effort.
Great. Shane, Jill, anything else to add to that on how do you convince senior management to become active?
Sure. This is Jill. So I would agree with Jennifer in that I think it's becoming less difficult to get them to take the first step. I think a lot of the people who are listening into this call are probably having a slightly different problem, which is we got them to sign off on Twitter, but we can't get them to sign off on Facebook and LinkedIn and all of these other platforms because they don't understand the inherent differences between the platforms and what the sort of different value propositions are. And so I think that's going to be a struggle for a lot of financial services. You know, just sort of managing one channel can be daunting, especially with, you know, FINRA and everybody wanting to sort of have a final say before the content goes out. So I would challenge everyone listening in to really sort of think about what, you know, how LinkedIn rounds out your content strategy. And I think some of the questioning, Ira, later in this call today will help people understand how to do that.
Mm-hmm. So one of the things that we think about a lot is you have all of the metrics, right, that you can show, all of the case studies and all of the proof that content is a better way of building relationships with customers, and that's what businesses want to do. There's all of that research that you can sort of bring and, you know, to convince stakeholders. One of the things that we notice is that a lot of times leaders within companies who already have a lot on their plates, or even just people in the marketing departments, there's a concern that this is going to add more to their workload, or that they're going to have to be, blogging or spending all day long, working in Twitter or LinkedIn. And so part of, I think, the pitch is that that's not what they have to do. There's actually two sides of it, that you can build teams around, leveraging the personas and the personal brands of your leaders and your experts. In a lot of cases, especially in the finance industry, these companies, the biggest assets they have are the brains inside of their organization. Right. And so if you can use your content teams and your social teams to unlock their knowledge and publish it for them, and use social platforms to have their persona be kind of the distribution, that can be really powerful. But the bonus is that you're building the personal brands of the people inside of your company, and that provides huge value to the organization in general, and it also keeps people around if you're providing value for your key employees. And so it's kind of that balance of letting them know that this isn't going to add more work on their plate, because you want to build a system that that you have people that can do this with them and for them, but that it's also going to build their leadership within their own company and within the industry, which is everyone wants to have that sort of Richard Branson persona, right? Like, who wouldn't want to have someone like that in their company, right? And that's kind of the pitch. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great point around putting them at ease, putting your top management at ease by building teams around them and leveraging their persona.
So Ira, yeah, perfect intro. I was just gonna touch on talking about personal participation. It also helps when you're advertising or social media promotions garner the attention of stakeholder peers or industry influencers. This type of attention will always increase buy-in to the program. This actually led to Larry Fink and the PR team, taking the steps towards personal participation with actually, LinkedIn influencers. And then also touching on metrics and convincing stakeholders, over time, I've seen over the past few years, especially at BlackRock, social has been able to have a seat at the table after we've been able to effectively communicate the data and the evidence, which Shane also touched on, that social can be a significant either traffic driver or can aid in amplifying campaigns and market. So we noticed when we're dark versus when we have always on, that we've seen up to a 300% increase in daily engagement when we have always on programs in place. And so once stakeholders see these results, they're more inclined to either increase the budget or discuss which platforms will make sense for particular content based on specific objectives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really great when you have the metrics that you can point to. And BlackRock, as Lauren mentioned, has Larry Fink posting as an influencer on LinkedIn. So those of you on the call who haven't seen it, check out Larry Fink on LinkedIn, and it's a great example of how they're using an executive on social media to be an ambassador. Great. Really good points there. So number two, sourcing great content. We all know that one of the biggest challenges for finance marketers is how do you consistently fill your editorial calendar, especially with quality content, right? So it's not really about just creating more content, but it really has to be high-quality content because there's so much out there now. So here are 5 ways that our marketing experts told us they source content internally and externally. Number 1 is slicing up your big pieces of content and creating smaller, bite-sized pieces. So whether it's a major research study or an event, you can slice up that content into smaller digestible nuggets of information. Number 2, and that's something that we really do here at LinkedIn, we call them turkey slices. Like during Thanksgiving, you have the big turkey, but after Thanksgiving, you're having leftovers for days, sometimes weeks. Turkey sandwiches, turkey omelets. So we really try to slice up our big rock pieces of content into smaller pieces like infographics and blog posts. Number 2, repurposing content that was successful earlier in the year. So, just because, if something was successful and you saw a lot of engagement around it, find a way to repackage that. It's kind of a variation on the turkey slices, but actually taking that same content and using it again later in the year because it could still be relevant. Number 3, partnering with brand journalists and publishers like Wall Street Journal or content services like Contently or NewsGrid to help fill out your calendar. Number 4, enlisting your audience. I think this is a key one. You know, we always talk about listening and engaging your audience, but one way to create content is through surveys, user-submitted photos, or other user-generated content, which is a great way to engage customers. And then number 5, reaching out to industry influencers to directly write for you. So that's a quick list, but I'm sure there's more that we can dive into. Shane, how about we kick this discussion off with you? How do you go about sourcing great content to fill a calendar?
Yeah, so the framework that we recommend for a successful brand content strategy is essentially a 3-step circle we call the Content Flywheel, which is create, engage, and then optimize. And you kind of do it all again. So you create original content, you use distribution platforms like LinkedIn and Facebook and email and Outbrain, or sponsored content to engage people with the content. And then you build your audience up and you analyze what works, and then you use data and insights to optimize your strategy and do it all over again. So this sort of CEO, create, engage, optimize, is the cycle, kind of the mindset that you need to be in if you want to do always-on content, right? You want to be improving constantly. So there's usually 2 kind of main challenges that you have in terms of sourcing great content. One is who's going to do it, and the other is what are you going to do, right? What are the ideas? How do you create content that's actually interesting, that actually will engage people? And so there's kind of 2 main ways that finance brands ought to think about sourcing content on an ongoing basis. The first is building an internal brand newsroom, which is an organization that's independently empowered to do this, to create, engage, and optimize content. What you don't want to do is put sourcing content on the side of a bunch of people's plates, people who already have a lot going on. You want to make it a priority, and it's either, depending on how much you can invest, it's either a person or a group that when it works best, that is independently empowered to build this. If you Google brand newsroom, the first result is our CMO guide to building brand newsrooms, which says a lot more than I can say kind of in this discussion. But you essentially want to have an internal content marketing chief, and under her, editors or freelancers or partners. But you want to have someone inside the organization who this is their job and they're empowered to do it. The second way you can do content is a partner, which is typically sponsored content or creating content in partnership with a publisher or another brand. So this is when you see, educational content sponsored on Business Week, or your executives writing opinion pieces on Fortune, and maybe those opinion pieces are actually ghostwritten by people on your content team. But you're basically partnering up with someone who's bigger than you, who has a bigger audience, so that you can provide some value to that audience and then use that to kind of get some of those people to join your own audience. And so those are kind of the 2 main strategies. The last thing I'll say before kind of throwing it out to others, and I can talk for hours on this, but that based on an enormous amount of research, it's clear that the only kind of content that works for brand publishers is original content. So you can't really get away with publishing other people's content on your own platform, or licensing or syndicating if you want to build your brand. It doesn't work for thought leadership. It doesn't work for SEO. But what you can do, and we might talk about it in the next question, is be a good internet citizen and follow what other smart people in your space are doing and comment on it and link out to them. So this is a way you can sort of fill the pipes with content by looking at what's being said and being thoughtful about your commentary or sharing credit. And so this is where LinkedIn becomes really powerful. You can publish original content on LinkedIn, kind of almost like the sponsored model, or you can promote your content. But then you can also periodically share updates in your streams from your thought leaders saying, look at this on the internet, this is interesting, here's what I have to say about it. And that's a way to kind of keep that flow going in a very smart way.
That's great. Yeah, I'm definitely going to Google brand newsroom after this. Kudos to your SEO team to get that CMO guide. Great. Anyone else? This is a huge topic. How do you get great content?
So touching on the brand newsroom, as Shane mentioned, the BlackRock has this is Lauren, by the way. So BlackRock has a plethora of talented individuals, and we're really fortunate to be able to select employees from this pool to be contributors on the BlackRock blog. And so each contributor has their own beat and industry topics that they discuss. And so we produce a variety of content that ranges from the evergreen pieces like high-level education or retirement pieces to the timely, newsy pieces that tap into what's currently happening in the markets with a unique BlackRock perspective. And so LinkedIn has such highly precise targeting capabilities that the platform allows me to create multiple campaigns that focus on serving content to FAs, end investors, millennials, and other various combinations of target audiences. And so recently, just touching on partners as well, we partnered with Bloomberg, and the goal there was to touch on market commentary with the unique BlackRock perspective, but we also parse it out, like Ira, you were talking about earlier, in infographics. So infographics to tell the story coupled with an article produced by Bloomberg contributors with the help of our BlackRock contributors. So that was a great partnership there.
That's great.
If I can jump in again, sure. You bring up a really good point that on the kind of where do our ideas come from thing, it helps to add some kind of constraints to parcel out the, based on timeliness, the kind of content that you want to do, and kind of the main buckets that we think of are evergreen, so content that can live for 100 years and people can still come back to; seasonal, which is content that you can plan on based on events that are coming up; and then timely, creating content or commenting on things that are going on an ongoing basis. And so if you kind of divvy up your strategy in that way, you're looking for news that you can comment on or trends. You're looking forward to events like the Super Bowl or spring or fashion season or whatever. And then in the meantime, you're working on sort of furniture items, educational stuff that is solid stuff that you want to have a long shelf life. That's a good way to start to move past the, oh man, what do we talk about problem when you say that the world, especially if you just throwing it out there as finance, we need to do content marketing about finance. That's such a dauntingly huge place to start. You want to divvy it up into timeliness, and that will also help you with that sort of dual strategy of pointing to things, commenting on things, creating original content, and partnering with people based on events that are coming up.
That's great. Yeah, I love that, thinking about your content in that matrix of three things: evergreen, seasonal, and timely. And we'll definitely talk about that in our next question as we talk about balancing editorial calendar with real-time market insights. But Shane, I wanted to pause on something interesting you said around the LinkedIn platform. You mentioned following what other people are doing and sharing credit. I think that's really huge, especially with the tools that we have around publishing content. So there's really a lot you can do on LinkedIn to establish yourself as a thought leader, whether it's sponsoring content or long-form posts. A lot of people aren't as familiar yet, but we launched the ability to do long-form posts last year, which means you can be your own influencer in your own right. So all the subject matter experts in your company can start posting themselves and establishing their expertise. So definitely check that out, long-form posts on LinkedIn, a great way to establish yourself as an influencer.
Yeah, and I can attest that this has been a huge way that we've grown our audience at Contently. Is, I got in on the LinkedIn, long-form thing early and started blogging, started posting, sometimes things that don't have to do with our space, but some, very often things that have to do with our space. And I have a big enough audience now that when I post an update or when I link to something, it actually gets a lot of attention. So our content team uses me as one of our distribution channels. So they'll say, we have this post that we wrote, let's promote it on Shane's LinkedIn, and then they'll add spend to reach, basically you can pay to promote those posts to the right sort of very select group of people that you want to get it in front of. And so it has this sort of boost effect. And so I kind of feel a little bit used by my content team because they're always saying, Shane, let's keep growing your audience, keep doing it. You need to keep blogging so that we can keep using you as a channel, because it gets more powerful, and the paid distribution that you do is more powerful. The more powerful your presence is, on the platform. So it's one of those things that has snowballed in a very very nice way for us.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is Jenny. I would just add that some of the places I've been, there have been many people who want to have that influencer status, and that's where an integrated approach, whether a meeting of all stakeholders, and stakeholder can be the people writing or the people posting, whomever is interested, to understand who we're going to go to for what. so back to Lauren's point about the beats, we wouldn't ask Shane to do everything. We would target it to someone that's already sort of spoken on those topics. I think everyone wants to be a star, but frankly, I go back to the rage against, make sure that it's relevant and make sure that the right person is saying it. And, Shane, obviously, you're the voice of Contently, and that makes perfect sense, but we wouldn't have a tax guy talking about emerging markets, for example, in a company like BlackRock.
Absolutely. We have, we have one of our initiatives this year is we have so many people inside our organization that are subject matter experts. We have a woman who is probably the best resource that I know in content marketing on content measurement and ROI. So we're trying to build her persona in that category, right? And I think sort of taking that model of, what you do with one individual and scaling it across others, other experts and getting to sort of smaller niches is a really effective strategy.
Yeah, I think there's a call for restraint at some point where we have enough content, let's have great content. We have enough experts, let's pick and choose and be selective and amplify them, selectively.
Yep. Yeah.
And I think that also goes to the point of being selective on your target audience as well. When we're talking about LinkedIn, as I mentioned before, LinkedIn has the most precise, targeting that you can get. Like, that you're going to reach an FA, or that you're going to reach someone who has a skill in investing or millennials. So, that's just as important as well, like not only picking the right person to speak to a certain topic or a theme, but also when you're distributing it, who does this make sense for? Because you can't just blast it out to everyone.
Yeah, and that's really how you remain relevant to your audience. It's really targeting specific content to that right person.
Right. Just a final thought from me anyway on this is, and that is why social media is different than advertising. And that, I think you can put up a billboard, you can't control who sees it necessarily, maybe zip code, but with social, it's actually, and I believe this, a smarter spend, because you're creating the same great content and putting it in front of the right people. And so it's been interesting. I'll just throw this out there. It's been interesting over the years that our closest alignment had been with media and advertising, and still is very much. But because social has such immediate metrics, it's actually forced a rigor in those other areas, like advertising, to say, well, how are we doing actually? It used to be social, justify your existence, and now I've seen a little bit of a shift to advertising. You also have to justify your existence. So it's an interesting trend, I'll say, a slow one, but interesting.
Yeah, that's great. Love that conversation around quality. And if you haven't followed Shane on LinkedIn yet, definitely look for him as an influencer. I know I follow him and get a lot of great content around content marketing. So definitely follow him, check him out if you haven't already. Great. So moving on to our next topic, number 3. We talked about how do you balance your editorial calendar with real-time market insights. This is really putting that always-on piece into your content marketing. And part of a successful always-on strategy is being timely with your information. But many times, by the time legal and compliance review your content and all the edits are made, real-time can turn into yesterday time. So, how do you get around that? Some of the ways you can get around the time constraints of legal approvals is by anticipating the content that might spark interest ahead of time, whether it's content tied to a speaking event or a major economic event that is coming. You can prepare and vet the content ahead of time. The second point is really important right here about developing a respectful, collaborative partnership with legal. I think we heard this from everyone that we interviewed. It's really at the core of a successful content strategy, and looking at your legal and compliance teams as partners, rather than a hurdle, where both parties take ownership of great content is critical. But we'd love to dive in with our partners, our panelists, on how we do that. It's easier said than done sometimes. And then finally, making sure that you have all the right tools and processes in place to streamline workflow and help you measure results. So we'd love to hear from our panelists around what tools and processes you use to make this easier. So Lauren, maybe we start with you. I know BlackRock does a great job weaving in real-time market insights into their social strategy. Can you talk a little bit about how you enable your teams to react in real time?
Absolutely. So I think, this goes back to what we were discussing before with, the three different themes of content that you can think about. We have the big rock, the always-on evergreen, you have the seasonal, and then you have the newsy, timely relevant pieces. So the social team uses an editorial calendar for our blog, and we also use an editorial calendar for our tweets and our posts for the week or over the course of the campaign. And so going back to the newsroom concept, we have our blog editor, internal blog editor, who holds a weekly meeting with input from all of our internal partners like PR and advertising, relationship marketing, and then also our contributors on the blog as well. And so, my job involves the constant monitoring, measuring, optimizing, and reporting on our paid platforms and content. And so this editorial calendar gives me a sense of what content is coming down the pipeline, so I can assess if it falls under the paid themes for the quarter that I've established with our brand advertising team. And then I can determine, what pieces of content should be distributed to the various audience segmentations. And so this calendar also, allows me to see what pieces are going to be upcoming, like I mentioned, but then also in terms of measurement. So how is it performing organically, and how is it, and if it has high organic performance, like that's my KPI for that. And then I also have, for paid as well, so the different target audiences, what is performing. If I see there's a certain dip, I'll take a look, and I'll look at the title and see like if there's something that needs to be changed or in the excerpt. And so that's what I typically do for the paid side of it. And for the the legal aspect, we have such a great relationship with our legal partners. We're actually very fortunate in that our compliance team sits right next to us, and so we have a wonderful working relationship with them. And a lot of it has to do with patience. So knowing knowing that we have a turnaround of 24 hours. Obviously we try to give them as much heads up, as possible. So anytime you can incorporate legal into the content creation process, that's always key, because that way you'll know either something's not going to work right away, or how can you tweak it and manipulate it so that it will be FINRA approved or able to launch and market. So definitely a great partnership with legal is key, and then having a process in place.
Great. I love that, having your compliance teams actually physically close to you. I think that's a great tip, just to have it. And if they don't happen to sit next to you, but actually spending time with them, developing that personal relationship.
Exactly, and I also think that part of it is a mutual respect, and I would always say that we shouldn't submit stuff we know is going to be not in compliance. So, we can't keep pushing an envelope when there's nowhere to push it. Once we prove that we understand what promissory means and we're not mentioning things like free money, then I think a trust starts to be built. And then when you do want to push an envelope, you have a forum to do that that's mutually respectful.
Yeah.
So I don't know that I would call that creative. I'm looking at some of the questions that have come in. I don't know if it's necessarily creative as much as a consistent, delivering on the promise, not making them the bad guys all the time. We all, we have a sense of what will fly. And so, when you do push, and even when you're planning to push, to bring them in early is best.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it really is it's a two-way street. Having that respectful relationship comes both ways, from the legal side to you as well. Having the legal teams understand that you have a common goal, and taking ownership of the social strategy as well on their side. I think at BlackRock, people were lucky to sit next to each other, and at Schwab, it was not that way, for example. But I say this, I know it's 8 or 9 in the morning, but a drink after work can go a long way, or a coffee during, just to treat people like humans really helps with something like that. Or actually picking up the phone and calling. So, you don't have to sit next to each other, but there are many ways that you can physically, have that relationship. So I think that kind of gets ignored in this day and age when emails are so easy.
Yeah.
Great. Jill and Shane, any comments on these points?
Well, I was going to add that I was just Googled this. I guess another thing to Google is Content Marketing BlackRock. The first result is a case study that we did on lessons from BlackRock and Guardian Life on how they have built their good relationship with their compliance departments and how to hurdle content marketing compliance issues. And I would say kudos to BlackRock for doing a very good job at this and being a good example. If you're worried about compliance, they're the ones to look at. And I think we've written a few times about this issue with them. But they do it the right way, so I think that's the case study to look into. So I'll just give a shout out to them.
Definitely, yeah, I read that. So those on the call definitely check out that article from Contently about how BlackRock has navigated the legal challenges.
Hey, Ira.
Yep.
Sorry, it's Lauren. I just wanted to mention one more thing too that I think is important to distinguish. BlackRock's main goal for timely newsy pieces is not to report on the story like every other professional publication, but to provide our contributors' perspective, with the BlackRock lens. But I just think that's important just for any company. Just you don't want to report on the news. You want to make it unique and have a different perspective based on what your company feelings are basically, versus reporting on the news. Otherwise, no one's going to read it because there are other professionals that are way better than you, doing it.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Having a voice and developing, what is your voice in the industry? There's a lot of news already out there, but how do you have an opinion so that people start to turn to you when news does break? That's a really good point.
I realize that what I just did is an example of what you're advocating for in a way, that balancing your editorial calendar with real-time market commentary. One of the best resources you have is your past backlog of evergreen content. So when something comes up in real time in the news, or in this case in a conversation about something that's relevant, pointing to something that you've published in the past and putting that back into social media, starting to re-promote that, put some distribution spend behind those old stories that are now suddenly relevant again, is actually a terrific way to not have to sort of race over to your legal and compliance teams and sort of rush to get something out. So this is another reason why Always On is a great strategy, is because you're building, as every day when you publish, you're building up this asset library of content that then can be recirculated back in the market when it's relevant again.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's such a great point. This is Jill. I think planned spontaneity is really important for financial services. It's using your always-on approach to really identify the moment to put content out. And to Sean's point, really a lot of the content already exists. Or, you can look at your calendar months in advance and sort of identify key themes, key events, key times of the year where you're going to need content, and you can plan for it. You don't need to do it days in advance. You can do it weeks and months in advance and still be relevant.
Mm-hmm. Yep, definitely. And when you do that in advance, you can kind of source your internal experts to have that opinion and have that vetted by legal. So I think that's a huge part about real-time. A lot of time, real-time insights aren't done in real time. It's done far in advance.
Right, and again, looking at some of the questions about that, I think, every place I've been, we've had editorial meetings, and, some places we've had a quick meeting every morning, like a newsroom. Others it's weekly, sometimes it's quarterly, like for a magazine. And getting the involvement of SMEs isn't always easy, and not all the meetings are appropriate for them to attend. It's sort of like a sausage-making party. It's not. Right. They're very busy, and they don't need to hear all of it. But in that case, the editor of the blog at BlackRock would meet with them separately. So she would have twice a month or once a month meetings and just throw out a few ideas, like, the Fed meets every 6 weeks. We think there might be something to this next one. Can you be on point for that? So giving them an actual thing, and fine if they say no, but they should probably have an idea of what they would rather do. So that I think it's like our audiences, our mass audiences, it's treating our internal people and individually as well. Some of them just aren't going to come to a 2-hour meeting.
And I think that's a great segue into a question that I saw come in on the Q&A around how to draw your internal experts out of their shells. You know, a lot of times they don't want to be out in the public eye. So any other tips? I think that's a great one, Jenny. So any other tips on how to draw them out of the shells to bring you ideas and getting that to be part of the culture in your organization? How do you do that?
I'm laughing because I'm like, can we put some of them back in their shells? I don't know. I think it goes into having that beat and understanding who's on point for what, and then very bluntly going back to, is it a part of their job or not? And in general, a place like BlackRock has deep bench, so there will be someone who can do it or who is sort of tapped to do it. Somewhere else, I can understand that that would be a bit of a challenge, and then I think it's building the case for why this topic and why we need an expert to speak on it.
I think you also need to have, and thank you, Jenny, for touching on that, but you also need to have PR buy-in as well. I mean, PR should be the first internal partner that you're going to. Number one, if you recognize that there's a gap in a certain theme that you want to talk about, or if there's a particular subject that's going to be coming up, it's identifying that person who can speak to it and working with your PR partners to see, number one, is there already someone tapped to do that? And if not, who would that best spokesperson be? And so, as mentioned before, obviously BlackRock has a deeper bench maybe than other organizations. But, you know, also I would say just ask around in the organization with people who are in that certain area and see who has an interest, because obviously you don't want to force anyone to do it either, otherwise it's not going to sound natural.
Right. That's a really good point about authenticity. You know, you want someone that that really wants to be there and really wants to do that. And when you get the right person, it becomes fun. You know, they get to see immediate feedback on their opinions, you know, comments, shares, and they can feed back into that. So you want someone that can engage with the audience on social.
I think also if you have people who are shy about creating content, a lot of times it's because they are shy in front of the camera, or they're not confident about their writing, or they think it's going to take a long time. Sometimes it's other reasons, but you can start small, get people used to this idea where if you have experts who you want their voice out there, play internal reporter, have your content team interview them and quote them in content that you do, get them visibility and recognition that way, and that will, I think, help people who are a little bit shy about it see kind of the rush that it is to be out there and to have your expertise, get more recognition, and then that can be a conversation starter for, well, hey, why don't we have you actually start writing, or let's interview you and then write kind of on your behalf. That often could be a good way to get started. And if they don't want to do it, then quoting them or tapping their expertise can be almost as valuable if you have someone else that's the voice that's going to get that out there.
Yep. Yeah, that's great. And then I think we spent a lot of time on this, but one last comment. I think this is where having top management buy-in is really important too, because once the rest of the company sees that the C-level executives are on board, it gives them an example to shoot for. So I think that it's all part of that process of getting the C-level executives on as well. Great. All right, so the last topic that we're going to dive into today is, how do you engineer your success? In other words, how do you measure and optimize your always-on strategy? First of all, it's really important to be clear about who you want to target. Lauren, you mentioned the importance of targeting earlier, but this really helps in measurement as well to help you establish the right metrics. And then another way to think about how you measure your content strategies is to create objectives by stages in the customer journey. So dividing your buyer's journey into stages like top and middle and lower funnel, and then creating reach, nurture, acquisition objectives for each stage. So a reach objective may be something around brand awareness and user engagement, while a middle funnel nurture objective would be around sharing contact information. Have they returned to your website? Are they attending your events? And are they turning into qualified leads? And then finally, what are your acquire metrics at the bottom of the funnel? Are they purchasing and renewing? Are they evangelists for your brand? Are you empowering your advocates about your brand? So those are just 3 ways that you can think about metrics. And as you get more specific around your measurement, that really helps you optimize and engineer your success. So, Jill, any tips on your end on how you think about measuring and optimizing your always-on strategy?
Sure. So I think everyone on the phone here would probably agree. You're dealing with a lot of different stakeholders, and your corp comm team might be, highly valuing an influencer engagement, where your marketing team may value leads, products and services. And then you've got your social team who's reporting back likes, comments, and shares, and it doesn't make sense. So I think what you need to do is, collectively align on key performance indicators sort of before venturing into your new platforms. Think about an audience-specific KPI or a program-specific KPI so that, when your either paid or organic initiative is done, you're able to go back and say, we had success and we were able to, we were expecting this and this is what happened, and we were able to measure against it. Test things like content formats, messaging, calls to action, cadence, time of day, really to learn what drives primary KPIs on each platform for each audience, especially if you have multiple lines of business, maybe for some smaller financial services or insurance, you sort of have a single focus, but I'm guessing that most financial services are going to have many, many focuses. A great example could be thinking about LinkedIn as, your organic KPI is ongoing support of a professional community, helping them get the thought leadership that they need, versus, your paid strategy, maybe you measure against, did we spark important dialogue? Did we drive traffic to the site? That's sort of how I think about it, and I'd be interested to hear how some of the rest of you think about it.
Jill, I think, you touch on exactly how I think about it for the paid side, but also how we do it organically. And going back to, what's the first question that, you should always ask? It should be, what are you trying to accomplish? The second question is, who is your target audience? And so I use a variety of indicators that aid in the content selection and also in the amplification process. So as mentioned earlier, some involve organic metric performance. Others include revisiting past high-performing pieces of evergreen content, click-through rate, engagement rate, combined with impressions served gives me a good indication about the health of a campaign and the targeting methods that I've employed and the content that I've selected for particular audiences. And so the question is, is it resonating? And you need to identify the different KPIs that allow you to basically see, is it resonating? And then, different campaigns or always-on content may require different methods of measuring success. So as mentioned earlier, I think by Jill, if you want, and Ira, but if you want brand awareness and engagement, then you'll be paying close attention to the volume and engagements on the platform and the engagement rate. If you want to drive users deeper into the site, then you'll be measuring a combination of KPIs plus, time on site is also key, because that indicates, this is the right target audience and, they're spending time with your content. And so you can measure that against, what's the average time on site that you have for either specific material, so either looking at marketing material or just the site in general, and then you compare it to how your particular campaign or pieces of content are doing. So that's also a great way.
We've found that there's so many metrics you can measure, right? We found that the most consistent proxy for the widest range of goals, whether it's on the purely sort of brand lift side or all the way to conversions and sales, is attention time per piece of content. And this is what's interesting here is a lot of times people will judge the success of a content program or a social program based on kind of the top level numbers of how many people saw it. But what's more interesting for getting more bang for your sort of end result is looking at the attention time that people are spending with an individual piece, and often those pieces will have gotten less traffic for some other reason because there's a lot of factors. But when you look at the content that's having the most people lean forward for the longest amount of time, that's what you should put your paid spend against. That's what you should recirculate through your emails and other distribution channels. Those are the ones you should promote on LinkedIn. We find that those end up having an outsized effect on whatever the end goal ends up being. And so I think we talk about all the metrics and we talk about, amount of time on page, but I think that's the most underrated one right now as a proxy for a huge swath of goals. So if you can measure one thing, measure that, and then use that as a jump-off point to optimize other parts of your kind of ROI calculation.
I completely agree, Shane. Completely.
Great. That's really great, and that really makes you think about how you deliver your content too. The format you deliver it in, so that you can track attention time. So that's really interesting. Great. Well, I think that we had an amazing discussion. I really want to allow some time for Q&A. So for the audience, go ahead and use the Q&A box on the right of your screen to ask any questions. I see some have already come in, so let's tackle some of these. So regarding senior management and getting them involved, how do you tackle the concern about exposing personal info via social? Interesting question, but I'm sure that's a concern for a lot of management. Is there a concern around exposing personal info?
I think that's a huge topic. I've been looking at that one, and I think there are companies that are built solely to address that. And I don't know if, Hearsay is a great example of something like that, to monitor what's going out from a brand perspective. But I think this question goes to an even more important perspective, which is, the rights of the individual, and why, because I work here, do I have to give up my privacy? And I think that is an ongoing discussion, and I know that different states even have different points of view on it. And ultimately, I think it's up to the business. So I'll give an example of BlackRock, and Lauren, keep me honest if this is still the case, but no one has their own Twitter account for BlackRock, right? So it's not Russ Costridge at BlackRock, it's BlackRock, and then there'll be something from Russ. I don't know if Russ tweets in his spare time, for example. So they've decided to keep it at a brand level, and part of it is that it would all accrue to the brand versus to the person who could, in theory, leave and take his audience with him. So I think it's a much bigger discussion. I'd love to know, Shane and Jill, not that I don't care what Lauren's saying, but I'm just wondering how you guys have been discussing it outside of BlackRock.
Sure. This is Jill. So I think when you're considering sort of people taking the face of the brand in their personal channels, that's a slippery slope unless they're very, very high level executives. And in those cases, I think you set them up with a brand-specific personal account that you, as the brand, can take away privileges were they to leave or something bad were to happen. When you start allowing somebody to use their personal account, recognize that they are building equity in themselves. And in many cases, that's okay. Again, very high-level executives. But I think you have to be very prescriptive around who you allow that sort of personal account activity to. And then to your point, Jenny, like everything comes back to the brand below that.
Great. And we probably just have time for one more question. Let's see, pick a good one. So Shane, you mentioned attention time for posts. Is there an analytics program that you use to see attention time for posts, or is that an internal metric that you track with your internal analytics?
So there's only two that I know of that do it really well. So a regular generic analytics tool like Google Analytics will tell you when someone arrived and when someone left, but it won't tell you if that person got up and made a sandwich or went and watched House of Cards. That there's two that I know of. They're Chartbeat, which is built for traditional publishers. It's RealTime Analytics. And then we have a tool called Contently Insights that's built for brand publishers that does a very similar thing. What those tools look at is based on how much content's on the page, how much of the content is the like the real content, not the advertiser content, and it will basically calculate how long it should take a person to consume this content, and if they stop scrolling or if they're highlighting or they're moving the mouse or clicking on the right parts of the page, then it will keep the timer going. But as soon as basically the algorithm detects it, like this person has spent so much on this that it can't be real, then it shuts off. So it's pretty sophisticated the way that works, but those are the two tools that I would recommend, and they're built for different audiences and have different sort of pricing. You kind of you get that tool with Contently, but you can't buy it as a one-off from us. But if you're a publisher, you can buy it as a one-off from Chartbeat.
Great. And then speaking of tools, I'd also like to give a plug to LinkedIn Lead Accelerator, which is a new product that we launched here at LinkedIn that's all around how you can remarket to people that have visited your website and move them down the funnel to actually start giving more information, offering them more content to move down the funnel into an actual purchase. So if you haven't heard of Lead Accelerator, please reach out to your sales executives, sales partners at LinkedIn to talk about that. So we're a little bit over, but I think like I said, we had a lot of great content to talk about. I saw a lot of questions come in around, is this going to be recorded? You know, this is great talk. Yes, we will definitely record this and send this out to everyone that attended. Once again, I want to thank our panel, our illustrious panel of experts. Thank you so much for your time today. Really great discussion. Once again, we'll send you, all the attendees, the PowerPoint presentation and a copy of our Sophisticated Finance Marketer ebook, along with the recording. And if you would like to read other case studies on LinkedIn, you can visit marketing.linkedin.com, and there's a lot of great content for you there. Also want to plug, at the end of this month, we're launching our second how-to guide around balancing editorial with real-time market commentary. We touched on some of that today, but we have a lot more in the next guide that's launching at the end of this month. So once again, thank you everyone for attending. Thank you to our panel, and as you log out, please fill out the survey and help us create more great content for you going forward. All right, have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.